it was just this moment where I realized like, oh, you're not supposed to talk about this kind of stuff on like a first date. Like it's supposed to be just like general getting to know you stuff, not like hard hitting like news and like representing like all of feminism like in my like opinions and actions. I mean, great news, he's a feminist too, so I'm glad that we found that out early. But like I just had this moment where like my heart dropped and I was like, well, I ruined it. Like I broke it. I had already done really everything that I wanted to do to get myself into a place professionally that I felt really good about. I had a really nice group of friends. I was like doing well with my finances. So it felt like everything was clicking into a place, and the thing that I was missing was a partner. All the conversation and all the getting to know you for actually in person, that's when I actually started to enjoy dating, instead of feeling like it was a second job. It was a second task or a job that I was doing every day by having all of these conversations, managing all of these digital relationships, and seeing if any of them are going to last long enough to get to that in-person phase.
I'd like to welcome to the show today Maria Pendolino. Maria, I'm very excited to have you on. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Awesome. I am very excited to talk about your 97 date adventure. I feel like you have a lot to share, and especially for women that are currently on dating apps or maybe considering going on dating apps. So yeah, maybe I'll start there and just ask you I was thinking about this question and I said, what motivated you to go on 97 dates? But I really kind of, what the word that actually came to mind was like, what possessed you to go on 97 dates? What happened?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I went on 97 first dates over the course of 13 years. So the very first date that I went on, an online date, was in 2003. It was my senior year of college, and it came from the website hotornot.com. So those of us who are aging elderly millennials or young Gen X may remember this website, where you would upload a picture of yourself and people could either rank you as hot or not. It was very simple. So this is pre-Facebook, pre-TikTok, pre-social media, pre-dating apps like Bumble and Tinder. OkCupid didn't exist yet. Match.com didn't exist yet. Um, so I posted a picture, senior of college, and somebody ranked me hot and then sent me like a private message on the platform and was like, "Oh, we actually live really close together. Would you like to go on a date?" And that was like the first one. And then over the course of 13 years, I went on 96 more dates, and they all originated from some type of online connection platform. I used Craigslist personals, where I would put a personal ad and people would respond to me. I tried Match.com, I tried eHarmony, I tried OkCupid, I tried Plenty of Fish, I tried Tinder and Bumble, and ultimately in 2016, I met my husband on Bumble. He was my 97th first date, and that was the last one, and hopefully forever the last one.
Amazing. Wow. Yeah. Unfortunately, I do remember Hot or Not. Yeah. Oh my God. I can't believe a first date yeah, came out of that platform. Amazing that on your 97th first date was with your now husband. And yeah, I want to know, like, when you started going on this adventure, like putting yourself on the online platforms, what made you choose that way in, instead of like the organic way of meeting
Yeah, I
someone?
think for me it was a couple of things. So I was not a big drinker, and I was not the kind of person who was like bar hopping a lot. So I didn't think, in your early 20s, like going out and socializing is definitely a big way that folks meet people organically.
Mhm.
And I just felt like I wasn't doing a lot of that just from the way that I spent my time and how my friends and I like socialized. I also, like in my early 20s, in the end of college and like going into my first couple years of like adulthood, like outside of an educational setting, like I was a workaholic. I was at work very, very late. Um, and there just wasn't a lot of time to just like put yourself out there. So if it wasn't going to be meeting someone like at work or in that kind of environment, I really didn't have a lot of other opportunities. I just wasn't involved in other things where you could organically meet someone. Like I wasn't a member of like an adult sports league. And I, at that time I wasn't like part of, any kind of like, church or spiritual groups where you might meet people who have like-minded values. Like I just wasn't a part of any of that. So I looked at online dating as just a way for me to like put my shingle up and be like, hi, like this is who I am. I am interested in dating. I'm interested in meeting someone. If anything that I say in these various kind of posts or profiles or whatever, if any of that like speaks to you, like I would love to go on a date, like just kind of like putting it out there. And I think the second thing for me of like specifically choosing online dating, I am a fat person. I'm a plus size person. And I think a lot of times I would associate the idea of meeting organically with like an instant physical connection.
Mm.
And I kind of had it planted in my head from just years of anti-fat bias and trauma that like people are not attracted to fat people. So I was like, well, on these online apps, I can lead with my personality, right? Because like I can crack jokes in a profile and I can curate their experience as an introduction to my life. And I thought that maybe, if there are other people who are serious about finding someone to be in a relationship with, because I really wasn't looking for just casual hookups. Like I really was looking for the idea of a long-term committed relationship, even if it wasn't specifically on a track towards marriage, but like two people who are being monogamous. Like that's what I was interested in dating. um it kind of gave me the opportunity to present myself beyond just that like instant like physical animal attraction. Like you see someone across the room, you want to meet them. You see someone on the subway, you want to meet them. Like just moving past that first step. And I felt like online dating gave me a really great opportunity to just say like, this is what I'm offering. Like this is who I am. This is what I've got. Like if you are remotely interested in this, you can potentially engage. So I felt like it gave me a little bit of the power, right? Because the power dynamic in just relying on organic meetings, a lot of times, if you're using like a very kind of classic definition of a heterosexual relationship, it's like waiting for a guy or a man to speak to you, right? Like
Mm.
they have to be the one who shows that first interest or ask for your number. And we're just like over here, like, just like, petting our hair and being like, please pick me, come talk to me. And for me, this was just a way to kind of like maybe just narrow down the playing field and also just level that playing field from a power dynamic standpoint and say like, hi, I am interested in going out. I am interested in dating. I'm interested in finding a partner. So like, immediately upon reaching my profile that like I'm willing to like go on dates and I'm willing to go out there. I'm not just gonna be like standing there giggling at the corner of the bar being like, no, I don't want anything, ha ha ha. So yeah, it was kind of that attitude that kind of led me into specifically focusing on online dating as a very, very early adopter. 2003 is a very early time to be starting online dating compared to what we have now.
Yes, yeah, totally. Wow. Yeah, and that's really that's such a good I love your motivations for going on there because it makes sense, especially when you saying like, oh, I didn't bar hop, I wasn't a member of the church. That's totally the similar experience for me as well. And I think a lot of women, so it could be the online dating app world it's really such a great place for, I don't want to say introverts, but people that are less, you know, I guess out there that are just that do that are a little bit, yeah, like introverted. So it could, and also like if there's insecurities or anything like that, it is a better way to just like, this is who I am. If you like me, you can talk to me, like showcasing our personality over our looks. It could be such a beautiful thing. And yet a lot of times that's that's not the end result, I guess, if that makes sense. So how did like the quality of dates, how did that evolve over time? Like you said, you were 13 years, you were on these online dating apps. Did you notice anything like when you first started, how you were maybe showing up compared to years down the line? Like how did you evolve in that? And I do want to ask you
Yeah.
about specific dates as well, but we'll get to that in a minute.
For sure. Yeah, I think a couple things changed over time. So, I think in the beginning, I think I was just very desperate for some sort of validation.
Mm,
Like, I just want to know that I am worthy and worthwhile, right? And I think that's a classic, like, quarter life crisis kind of attitude to have. You've gotten out of college, you're no longer living in your parents' home, maybe you're sharing an apartment for the first time as an adult, and you're in this kind of like transitional period. Like you're kind of independent, but you're still learning and all of that kind of stuff. So I
mhm,
think in those very early days, I was just desperate for the validation that like I was worthy and that I belonged in the universe. So I would say at the very beginning of my journey, I was not as choosy. So anyone who showed interest in me from the shingle that I put up, I
mhm,
think my attitude was like, I'll meet anyone for a drink.
mhm,
I think it's difficult to establish any kind of like real attraction based on pictures and whatever someone describes. But I was basically just looking for guys that put in enough effort to demonstrate that they had read something in my profile, like identified like with somewhere that I mentioned that I had traveled to, or identified with something that I mentioned as a hobby. Like, did you at least
mhm.
read, the 300 words of text or something that
Yeah.
I've had to put together? Or did you have something to say? Like
Mhm.
a lot of times you would just get messages like nice pictures, and it's like, okay, like, thank you so much for bringing that to the table.
Mhm.
But and someone was like, "Hey, I came across your profile. Like, oh, I've been to the UK twice too." Like, it's like, "Okay, great, you read." Fantastic. Like the bar was low. The bar was like very low. And then I think in the earlier days, there was definitely a lot of emphasis on written communication.
Mhm.
So like when I used Craigslist personals, like in the very beginning, basically I'm putting up a personal ad and then people are responding to me. And there's a
Mhm.
lot of communication going back and forth over email. And then in using apps like Match.com and eHarmony, there was like just a huge emphasis on messaging, like messaging within those platforms.
Mhm.
And then as we move to the swipe apps, of the 21st century, our Tinders and our Bumbles and things like that, you are basically making a snap judgment based on just pictures, age, and location. And then the question is, how much back and forth do you have before you get to the date? So I think
Mhm.
as I got into those later years and just having more experience, I was really looking for someone who I felt like could be a personality match, but I was not trying to um I was not trying to find that personality match on the app. I was trying to find that personality match in person. So instead
Mhm.
of wasting 2 to 3 weeks having pen pal conversations with someone who ultimately either you don't meet because it just fizzles out and you stop
Mhm.
communicating, or
Mhm.
you do meet and you realize there isn't any attraction or isn't any spark, or the person is very annoying, or they determine that you are very annoying, or whatever. And you've spent all of this effort kind of getting to know you and sharing stuff about life and slice of life and checking in and all of that. You've spent all of this effort just to get to this date and find out that you're not compatible to begin with. So in my later years, I moved to meeting as quickly as possible and saying like,
Mhm.
okay, we've matched. Are you available this week Friday, or are you available to grab a drink on Monday? And just moving immediately to that introduction so that in person we could find out if we want to keep talking, instead of spending 3 weeks talking, getting to the date and finding out that we don't want to keep talking, and then it just seems like a waste of effort that you've put in. So I think
Mhm.
that's kind of how it changed over time. I think in the in the very beginning, I was least choosy, and then at the end I was more choosy, but it was more about just trying to find the people who are actually willing to go out on a date, because there were so many people who were just using the app as another thing to do on their phone
Yeah.
and weren't actually serious about meeting someone. So I would say I wasn't necessarily more choosy in the later years, but I did immediately dismiss people who were not interested in getting together. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, we matched. Great. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Are you available on Friday? And then just like silence. And it's like, great. I'm moving on. Thank you so much. And it
Yes.
wasn't about being choosy about how that person looked or their hobbies or their background. It was just about being choosy, saying, you're not engaging with me, which tells me that you're not actually serious about meeting someone to date off of this app. And therefore, I'm just going to self select you out right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my gosh, makes it so much less overwhelming and just like, let's go, like gets you to your person quicker.
Yeah,
Just
and I
to,
just felt
mm-hmm.
like there was a period of time where I felt like I was having like 15 conversations at once
Oh my
with
gosh.
people who I was in different stages with. I was like, "Oh, I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking to two guys on Match.com. I'm talking to two guys on OkCupid. I'm talking to two people on Bumble." And I'm just like having these like ongoing conversations, and it's like, "Okay, I'm scrolling back up. Have I talked to this person about my family yet? No. Okay. Have I talked to this person about my
Oh
job yet? No. Okay." And it's almost like you had to manage like a project management matrix
my
to be
God.
like,
Yeah.
who have I had conversations with? Who have I talked to? Did I talk to this
Mm-hmm.
person on the phone yet? Whatever. And I was like, this is bananas. I don't need to be talking to 15 people at once, like whittling that funnel down to like one person to go out with. No, let me just
Mm-hmm.
go out with someone and find out if I want to go out with them again. Yes or
Mm-hmm.
no. Very simple. And I was
Yeah,
really pleased after I made that change to just keep it as simple as possible.
totally. Just having you talk about that, like 15 conversations. Like, oh my God, I'm starting to sweat. Like what you said, project management. It's hard enough to like keep up with like your best friends in conversations and
Absolutely.
like life in general. And then to have 15, potential romantic partners that you're speaking with. What have I said to them? Have I responded to them? My God, that would just like consume your life. So yeah, then no wonder that just freed up space and yeah, simplified the process for you.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. What was one thing that's coming up for me is like, what was because you were talking about, you have these conversations with someone for such a long time, and then you go on a date and you find out, well, that was kind of a waste of time. Do you remember like your biggest disappointment on a date?
Um, there was one guy there was one guy that I went out with in Chicago, and we had chatted just a little bit. I don't remember which app we had met through. And we went out on one date and had like kind of a good time, had quite a bit in common. And then we had scheduled a second date for brunch, and he showed up wearing pajamas, and not like cute pajamas, like, oh, look at me, I'm being funny, like literally rolled out of bed, like bedhead, like hair flattened with like it like spiking out here.
Oh
And it wasn't like if he had been like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I'm late, I totally overslept, I just literally ran here, like that would have been funny.
no.
But no, he was just like very just like lackadaisical slat down. He was wearing like legitimately like Target level pajamas. The shirt was inside out. I could see like the seams, like just zero effort. And I'm not
Yeah.
asking a guy to like wear a tuxedo to brunch, but like brush your hair and like make sure that the shirt is right side out. Like that doesn't
Mm,
seem to me to be like that's not a lot to ask for. It's just like your shirt on correctly and like your hair combed or brushed so it
mhm.
doesn't have the imprint of the pillow left on it. You're going on a second date with someone. And
Mhm. Oh
again, I'm
my
not
God.
saying like you don't have to impress me. You don't have to go out and buy a new outfit. You don't have to
Mhm.
like bring me flowers like and like sweep me off my feet, but just like baseline
Mhm.
baseline human being in the universe effort like would
Mhm.
have been nice.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, over the course of all of the dates, I really don't have any like truly nightmare stories.
Okay.
There were a couple that like just like leave a bad taste in your mouth, and then the rest of them honestly were just not memorable. Like
Mhm.
of the 93 I went on, I probably went on like 12 or so second dates. And of those like
Wow.
12 or so second dates, I probably dated like 5 people where like we went on multiple dates across a couple of months, and like ultimately it didn't end in a relationship, it just like ran its course.
Mhm.
So if you think about that, it's almost like a 1 in 10, like almost 10% like yielded a second date, and then from that like one in like the five that were left.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think that one sticks out in my mind is just like, I'm trying here, right? Like I've put myself out here. We arranged this. This is the second date. Like
Hmm.
of all the numbers in the world, like we've made it to the second date, and just to have somebody like show up like that, it's like, well, this isn't gonna work for me.
No, definitely not. Was the brunch good at least?
I don't remember. I just was so flabbergasted that the shirt was inside out.
Oh man, yeah. Jeez. Yeah. And so when it came time for your 97th date, if you looked at like where were you at in your life, like your before you even maybe had contact with this 97th person, where were
Mhm.
you at comparatively to the start of your journey?
Yeah, so I was using Bumble exclusively at that
Mm-hmm.
point. So in 2016, I really moved to just using Bumble. Had a few pictures up on there, just, short description, and like was immediately moving to asking people if they wanted to meet for either a drink or dinner. I had two locations that I knew really well. They have good parking. I felt very comfortable at both of these places. So if I had matched with a guy and after just those basic pleasantries, I would say like, hey, do you want to meet for a drink or dinner? Like for drinks, I love going to this place. For dinner, I love going to this place. What do you think? And I would let them pick. And almost exclusively, the guys would pick the bar for the drink, which is fine. Like the online dating, like first introduction had really moved away from like sitting and having a meal with a
Mm-hmm.
person and just like at least starting with just a drink, like simple, quick, low stress, low commitment. So I had probably gone on maybe like five or six like get a first drink dates that year.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There was one guy that I had gone on a second date in that batch. And ultimately that was our last date because we went to a comedy club for our second date and had a really good time. And he grabbed the check, which I thought was very nice, unexpected, but like very nice. And I noticed that he did not leave the server a tip.
Okay.
So like we kind of like said our goodbyes and we left. I went to the bathroom and then I went back and I put money on the table because I was
Mm-hmm.
not going to leave without tipping the server because I'm just not
Mm-hmm.
that kind of person. So that ended
Mm-hmm.
that date. So yeah, I would say going into my 97th date, like I had, a few dates that year, but none of them were particularly outstanding. So I was still very much like it's not like I was coming out of a breakup or anything like that. I was still just very like fresh and eager, like looking for a
Mm-hmm.
partner.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how did the conversation with your 97th date start?
So my husband's profile picture that he had posted on Bumble
Mm-hmm.
was him kind of very proudly gesturing to some pickles that he had canned. So there was this like stack of like homemade canned pickles on his counter and he was like showing them off. So my opening line to him was, "It looks like your pickling and canning game is on point." And he reported back that he had too many cucumbers in his garden that year. So that was kind of like the choice to make pickles. And we had just like a very brief, like, "Oh, what did you do today? This is what I did." And then at the end of that conversation, we exchanged phone numbers. And I actually texted him first and was like, "Hey, Eric, it's Maria from Bumble. Just sending you a text so you have my number. Let me know when you'd like to get together." And we immediately made plans. And I gave him the standard offer of like, "Here's the bar, here's the restaurant." And he picked the restaurant. He was like the first
Mm,
guy who picked the restaurant. So I was
mm,
like, okay, interesting. So that's how the online conversation started. And yeah, in the restaurant we sat there for about 2 hours. I mean, we had really really nice back and forth organic conversation, the kind where you don't have to like pause and think of a question to ask because
mm-hmm,
you're just jumping from topic to topic really easy.
mm-hmm,
We did have a very, very, very funny moment that my husband loves to remind me of. But right around the time that we went on our first date was the time that the court case was happening for the Stanford student who was like an all-star swimmer who had unfortunately sexually assaulted a fellow student at a party.
mm-hmm.
And he had just been sentenced that day, I think. So at some point, somehow, we started talking about this jerk, like
Okay.
during the date. I don't know how we got into the conversation, but after about 10 minutes, I just stopped and I went, and he's like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "I just realized that we've been talking about like sexual assault on a first date for like 10 minutes. And like, maybe that's like
Oh.
not the best thing to talk about." So he loves to remind me of this, that like I bring up like taboo topics like way too early or something. But it was just this moment where I realized like, oh, you're not supposed to talk about this kind of stuff on like a first date. Like it's supposed to be just like general getting to know you stuff, not like hard hitting like news and like representing like all of feminism like in my like opinions and actions. I mean, great news, he's a feminist too, so I'm glad that we found that out early. But like I just had this moment where like my heart dropped and I was like, well, I ruined it. Like I broke it. So that was a kind of funny thing that happened in our conversation. But yeah, we sat for like 2 hours and just the conversation was very, very organic. And when we left, it was like, hey, I had a good time. I had a good time. Like, let's do this again. And then it went from there.
Amazing. Also really interesting that it sounds like you just kind of let loose and weren't thinking about what you were supposed to say, but that you just were able to have this conversation about a delicate subject and also find out you're on the same page.
Yeah, it really was like I was talking to a friend. And I think
Mm,
had I not felt that way, I definitely probably wouldn't have made it into that conversation topic, because
yeah.
we just wouldn't have gotten there organically.
Yeah, yes. And also interesting that then, even though we're feeling really good, those voices come in like, oh, you ruined it. Yeah, fucked up.
Yeah. No, exactly. The internal judgment team was like immediately like, F, score F, like you are rejected. So
Yeah.
yeah, my husband likes to give me the business on that one. Just like it's
Mm-hmm.
just like a funny memory.
Mm-hmm. And how did you, if you remember, like how, because you said it felt like talking to a friend. Do you remember how like you felt in your body around your husband compared to like the dates before?
Yeah, I felt really comfortable. I had I had gotten to the restaurant first, and that was a strategy that I employed often. And one of the reasons I did that was because I have a disability. I have psoriatic arthritis. And because of that, my walking sometimes is a little wonky. So I want to be like at the restaurant seated and comfortable before someone comes in,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like I can be my best if I am not like struggling or kind of broadcasting the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that I was really slick and smart, like having done this. And then my husband told me, like, during the date that he had found me on Twitter and had read my whole like tweet feed about me having my knee replaced. And like, so he already knew going into the date that I had, potentially a physical challenge already. So
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was being like super smart and savvy. And he's like, yeah, I know all of those things already. So that was just like an interesting, like, you think in your mind that you can control all of these variables. Like you can
Mm-hmm.
control what you look like and you arrive and you can tell this part of your story but conceal this part or whatever. And it's like you don't have that power. You don't have that control.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember being really struck by how attentive he was, and how well he listened, and the fact that he didn't interrupt or try to finish everything that I said, which was refreshing, I think. He also asked me a lot of questions about me. I think a lot of women who are doing the online dating thing, one thing that a lot of people report as a frustration is um potential partners just not asking them questions about them and just constantly just verbally vomiting things about
Mm-hmm.
themselves. And I was really struck by how many follow-up questions he asked to like things that we were talking about. Like he wanted to know
Mm-hmm.
more about me and not just in context of how he was going to add something about himself to the conversation, but
Uh-huh.
really just digging in and getting to know me. And that felt different. That felt different and exciting.
Mm-hmm. And also the fact that what you said that he had read up on your Twitter, like that's sweet, you know? Like, okay, like he actually did his research
I
to
know.
get
I
to know
feel like
you.
girls always get we always get the the marker of being like the crazy investigative reporters who will like deep dive on people's like Instagram and be like, oh, what's his first and last name? And within 30 seconds, we've got like, their full bio and what they ate for dinner last week and all of that kind of stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like women kind of get the rep for being crazy like that. But it was
Mm-hmm.
nice. It was nice that he took the time to like look me up, and he learned a little bit about my career and like found
Mm-hmm.
some of my like public social media profiles, which is fine. Like I wasn't skeeved out by that. I
Mm-hmm.
I choose what to share publicly, so
Yeah.
it's for anybody to kind of come upon.
Mm-hmm.
But that was nice. It was just like you could tell that he put effort into the date, not only
Mm-hmm.
from a like appearance standpoint and like choosing to sit down and have dinner, like, but also like showing up to the date like ready to like talk and meet someone, which was really nice.
Mm-hmm. What was your husband's experience like? Has he shared that? Like what it was like the first date was like for him?
Yeah, so we had kind of a polar opposite experience in that my husband was coming off of a 7-year relationship. And he was urged to get back out there by his best friend. His best friend encouraged him to download Bumble and Tinder and the apps and just kind of get a profile together and get out there. Just need to shake the dust off and try to be an adult who dates in this modern world.
Mm-hmm.
My husband had gotten together with the person that he was with previously when he was in college. So there's the whole kind of phase of life thing. When you're dating someone in college, it's different than kind of starting a new relationship with adults in the modern world,
Mm-hmm.
where you're not all in the same space, physically, mentally, emotionally. So his friend encouraged him to download the apps. He put up his profile, and he told me that he, had talked to a couple people, but I was actually the first online date that he went on coming out of his previous relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So here I was going on my 97th first date, like full online dating professional, confident, ready to go, know the formula, all set, a real pro. And he was like, showing up for the first time, like going on a blind date for the first time, meeting someone
Mm-hmm.
off the internet for the first time. So he hit the lottery. I hit the lottery. It's just I played a lot longer than he did.
Yeah, amazing. And at what point did you know, like, did it kind of creep in that, man, this could be my like forever person, or did it just hit you one day? When did you know?
Yeah, so we went on 5 dates that ended like platonically.
Mm.
So, like the first
Mm-hmm.
date, it was like standing on the street, like, nice to meet you, nice to meet you, we should do it again, and just like walk away. And then the second date ended with maybe like a hug. And like the third, fourth, and fifth dates also ended with just like a hug, like nothing too romantic.
Mm-hmm.
So I at that point, after those 5 dates, two were at a restaurant, two were at a comedy club, and one was at a music venue. So kind of like out and about doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I knew that I enjoyed talking to him. I knew that I enjoyed spending time with him. I knew that he was a thoughtful person. And I knew that I was like interested in continuing further, but I was like, at some point we have to see if there is a spark. I'm not going to get a real reading on this from a hug in a parking lot after, a 2-hour dinner or a 2-hour show or something.
Mm-hmm.
So for our sixth date, I invited him over to my house for dinner and I cooked. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
you can bring the wine, I'll make dinner, whatever. And we sat and had a really nice dinner and we drank some wine. And I was definitely feeling like very like loosened up and comfortable. And we went over to the couch and like put something on Netflix. And within a half an hour, we were making out like middle schoolers, like hoping that their parents weren't going to come home. And that was kind of like the like, oh, there's something here, like I am definitely attracted to you, we are definitely compatible, you are a good kisser, this is great news, like let us continue down this avenue.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of had to, I was the one who initiated, like, would you like to come over to my house, knowing full well that this is going to be the test, like this will
Mm-hmm.
be the test of, do we like each other, is there a physical attraction, Are we, compatible in that way too? I
Mhm.
knew that we were compatible in like being two people like out in the universe, like doing activities, and like that's great. But like,
Yeah.
are you someone who can be a friend and a lover, or are you only going to be a friend?
Mhm.
And I was delighted to find out that we had chemistry, and it worked out really well. So it was date number 6 at my house that we kind of took it to a point where we're like, okay, great, we are dating, like we are in a relationship.
Mhm. Yeah. Awesome. And then how did the relationship evolve from there? And like your feelings as well. Like how did it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It moved really quickly. It moved really
Mhm.
quickly, and I think there is something to be said for like meeting a person when you're, in your mid 30s compared to meeting someone in your mid 20s.
Mhm.
Like I was ready. Like I was ready to find a person to build a life with. I had
Mhm.
already done really everything that I wanted to do to get myself into a place professionally that I felt really good about. I had a really nice group of friends. I was like doing well with my finances. So it
Mhm.
felt like everything was clicking into a place, and the thing that I was missing was a partner, a
Mhm.
romantic partner. I had great friends that I could, travel with and do things with, but there's a difference in having someone who's like by your side day in and day out. And that's really what I wanted. I wanted to add that to
Mhm.
my life.
Mhm.
Um, but we moved quickly. So we went on our first date in the beginning of August. It was like August 11th, I think. So then over the course of a month and a half from the beginning of August to the end of September, that is when we went on kind of the 5 or 6 dates over the course of a month and a half. I had done
Mhm.
some traveling in there because I was going to a conference and stuff. So it was a little bit elongated coming out of like the Labor Day holiday. And then I took him on a weekend trip to see some of my friends who live in New York City.
Mhm.
So he got to meet a bunch of my friends. And one of one of my friends cornered him drunkenly and was like, "If you ever do anything to hurt Maria, like I'll come for you," which was really funny. She did it in like a loving drunken way.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so that kind of took us towards the end of October, beginning of November. And by like Thanksgiving, he was sleeping over at my apartment like every night.
Mhm.
And he actually moved in with me in February. So
Mhm.
from August to February is about 6 months. So we went from first date to him like fully moving all of his stuff in within 6 months.
Mhm. When you know, you know.
When like I think that's true. Like we really settled into a very nice routine.
Mhm.
I had my own apartment with a lot of space, so it was just much easier to do things at my place. And yeah, it just got to the point where it was just like, yeah, I really don't want you to leave. So
So nice. And I love that you said, it really sounded like you had like you loved your life already. Like you had great friends, you were in a great place, career-wise, financially. And that's such a difference too. Like if you think about the start of your dating adventure in 2003, like none of those things are in place yet, really. Maybe some friends, but even that stability isn't really there yet. So it makes sense that like your husband came in at this time where you already kind of had everything except for this person.
yeah, he was very much an addition to a life that I had built for myself as opposed to like
Hmm.
him completing it. It was more
Yeah.
about like adding him into the life that I had built. And I
Mm.
think, I was just I was a confident person at that point. Like I was, just at definitely a different stage of life. I was feeling good about what I brought to the table. And it was just about finding someone who was interested in like hopping on a moving train. I I think a lot of people get stuck in thinking that like their life will start after they find a partner. Like
Hmm.
with a partner, like they will build that life for themselves. And I feel like if I had done that, I just would have been waiting for a really long time and
Yeah.
waiting for a lot of things. But like
Hmm.
I was not afraid to build a business, buy a car, get a place to live. Like I did all of these things as an independent person,
Hmm.
and then took the time to integrate someone into my life as opposed to waiting to do any of those things until I had someone to do them with.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. And I think that's a big reason why the online dating experience is pretty awful for a lot of people. And I think it's because maybe some of these things aren't set up yet, or oftentimes, you join a dating app when you're lonely or when things, you just had a breakup or like just things aren't very good. That's usually when we tend to install it. And I hear like women all the time, I uninstalled it, I reinstalled it, I uninstalled it, I reinstalled it. And like, when did you reinstall it? Usually at a time where it's like, I don't feel so good. So it just makes, and I've heard a lot of success stories, especially on Bumble. I just had a couple of my friends there within 1 year, they both got married to a woman, they're their brothers, and they both met their wives on Bumble after years of being on Bumble with no luck. And then something, I don't know, with both of them in the matter, I think it was like within 3 months of each other, they both met their wives on there. And just incredible when you're just in a good place and it just, yeah, opens the door to love.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge part of it. Like, your mindset has to be right in order to invite someone in.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're trying to invite someone in and like you're not in a great place, then there's no way that a relationship can get off on the right foot.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think that it means that you have to wait until everything is perfect,
Mm-hmm.
because again, like perfect is the enemy of the good, right? Like you'll be waiting forever to get to a place where you feel like 100% confident. But
Yeah.
like make sure that you're not like a raging basket case, because like if you're really not feeling great about yourself at all,
Mm-hmm.
like you won't be able to play pretend at like
Yeah.
having yourself put together. But like if you're like in general feeling good about like yourself and your outlook, like put yourself out there. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. That's such a good point. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to wait like, oh, I still got work to do. Oh, I still got healing to do. I still got growing to do. You're always going to have that. So yeah, don't let that stop you. That's a really good
Yeah,
point.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So when did y'all get married and who proposed to who? I think with you, I
So,
gotta ask.
I know that this is definitely a situation where I could have been like, marry me immediately. Um, we got married in 2018. So, after he moved in February and we were very much in love and enjoying each other's company, we had a conversation where I said, "Look, I really enjoy being with you." And he said, "I really enjoy being with you too." And I said, "If we are going to go down this path, which it looks like we are, it means that we would probably be setting ourselves up to get married in like 2 years." And like, I'm the kind of person who loves to back into like what I need to do like ahead of time. So if we're going to get married in 2 years, that means for the next 2 years, I want to be like putting money away for like this future wedding where we're going to invite our friends to like eat food and drink drinks. And we literally started a Google Doc together, and it was called the unofficial head count for a future party where our friends will eat food and drink drinks. That's like the whole name of the Google Doc. And we made a list of like all the people that we would want to like come party with us in 2 years. And then from there, tried to figure out how expensive the wedding would be, because I have an enormous Italian family. Um, and that was kind of like our very like not particularly romantic but kind of funny conversation about just like the logistics of being people in your 30s getting married. Um, and like my parents did not have like a huge fund saved for like a future wedding, and this was his second go around. So, we knew that like maybe our families would like chip in a little bit, but like if we wanted to throw like a big party, it was going to be on us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that conversation happened probably in like February or March, and then he actually proposed to me in April the next month. So we got engaged in April of 2017, and then we got
Mm-hmm.
married in October of 2018.
Wow, amazing. I want to ask how he proposed.
It You know what? It is not a shock and awe story. It is very cute.
Mm.
He bought a ring and came home after work. I worked from home. He worked out of the home. So he came into my like work from home office. He had like a huge bouquet of roses. And I looked at him and I was like, "Oh my gosh, flowers." That's all I thought. And I went up and I gave him a hug, and his heart was beating out of his chest.
Oh.
And I was like, again, like me being like the stupidest person in the room, I was like, "Oh my god, your heart's beating really fast." And he was like, "Well, that's because I wanted to ask you something." And I was like, "Okay," still completely clueless. And then he got down on one knee and proposed to me right in my office.
Oh.
And I was completely shocked. I had no idea it was coming. And funnily enough, we had scheduled that evening, we were going out to dinner with my parents, and we were going out to dinner with his dad and his dad's wife for them to meet for the first time.
Mm.
Um, and I just remember his dad, who unfortunately has passed away now, but at that dinner, we like revealed like, haha, we got engaged today. And his dad like looked at me, looked at the ring, looked at him, and was like, on a Wednesday? And that was such like a funny joke that we've kind of kept together.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was unexpected, it was just simple, it was at home. But it was so sweet, and I like very much did not know it was happening until like 75% of the way there. Like I was just so clueless and so just like missing the point.
That's so sweet. That's so sweet. I can really just picture it and yeah, just so sweet and also like so comfortable and like such a secure setting, nothing grand, but like no less special.
Yeah, he knew that I definitely did not want like a gigantic like public brouhaha, like a jumbotron kind of proposal. Like
Mm-hmm.
he knew in advance that that's absolutely not something that would have appealed to me at all.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this was fine. It was very very comfortable, and like I said, I really didn't know it was happening until it was like really happening.
It's really sweet. Where are you guys at today?
Yeah, so we survived the pandemic, which is
Mm-hmm.
great. We had a very locked down pandemic because of my disability. I'm immunocompromised. So for the beginning of the pandemic and for a long time, we were very locked down. So, if a relationship can survive like that being the only person you see for a long time, that's
Mm-hmm.
a great sign. Um, my husband believes that maybe he was born just too late to be a lighthouse keeper. He's an introvert's introvert, so he really does not mind staying away from people, whereas I'm an extrovert and I love getting my energy from people.
Uh-huh.
So we definitely were like the yin and the yang of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I was like desperate to like get out and do stuff, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm really fine just hanging out here in my house by myself." Um, we bought a new house at the end of 2021 that we renovated all throughout 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lovely property. It has 5 acres. We put in a pool last year. I joke that like this will be the last place I live. You can take me out of here in a bag. I'm not leaving, moving, renovating ever again. But yeah, this year we will have been together for 8 years in August, and November 2024 we will have been married for 6 years, which
Mm-hmm.
is wild to think about how fast time flies.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Maria, for women that are, maybe at the beginning of their online dating app journey, or a lot of them, feeling frustrated with what they've experienced so far on the dating apps, or also just scared to go, download a dating app. What advice or tips, plural, would you give them?
Yeah, so I would say don't be afraid to put yourself out there. It's not as scary as you think. Um, be honest and open to the process. Don't worry about trying to be perfect, perfect looking or perfect place in your life. Um, I do think that there's an element to it that's a numbers game. You just kind of have to like get out there, and it's just like trying on clothes, man. You try one on and like it fits, but it doesn't fit perfect. So you move on. You try one on and like, whoa, this one doesn't fit at all. You move on. This
Mm-hmm.
one, you try it on, it fits and it lasts for a while, but it doesn't last as long as you would like it to. You move on. Like, I think you just have to have an open mind about it. I also I kind of amended my dating strategy, as I mentioned, to move right to the introduction. And I kind of got that idea after reading Aziz Ansari's book, Modern Romance. And he talked a lot about in that book how dating has changed so much from like our grandparents' generation, our parents' generation to where we are now. You know, we used to
Mhm.
date very, very close to home in like a couple block radius of people that you went to school with who lived nearby you.
Mhm.
In the 30s and 40s, it was very popular for like group dating. So, like, groups of 10 or 12 people would go out at a time, and then you would just like pair off with different people within the group. But like, you really weren't going
Mhm.
outside of like a large radius, right? So, now with the apps, we have such analysis paralysis because we get access to so many different people in so many different communities. And you can
Mhm.
even date in different cities and things like that. Like, the world is your oyster, right?
Mhm.
But the one thing that I took from that book that I really loved was the only purpose of the app is to introduce you to someone you would not otherwise meet. And if
Mhm.
you treat that introduction the same way that you would an introduction in a bar or an introduction at a laundromat or meeting someone at a Starbucks or whatever, that introduction, you have that quick first meeting, you exchange numbers, and then you have to move to do something else. And I
Mhm.
think if you use the app the same way, that's where I started to find success in that I was actually enjoying online dating and not dreading it. So
Mhm.
use the dating app as the introduction engine. It is bringing two people
Mhm.
together who would not otherwise meet. And then you have to meet in person immediately. Move immediately to getting a drink, going out to dinner, taking a walk. You know, if there's something like, I saw some people like a great idea for a first date. If you find out that you both like dogs, like go volunteer to walk dogs for 2 hours at like the animal shelter. Like, pick up a
Mhm.
dog and go walk with that person and grab a coffee on the way. Like, there's so many different ways that you can do a first date that's low stakes, right?
Yeah.
Just a chance to like meet in person and start a conversation there. But when I started using the apps as just the introduction engine and saved all the conversation and all the getting to know you for actually in person, that's when I actually started to enjoy dating instead of feeling like it was a second job. It was a second task or a job
Mhm.
that I was doing every day by having all of these conversations, managing all of these digital relationships, and seeing if any of them are going to last long enough to get to that in person phase. So I would recommend that you use the apps only to make the introduction and then move to real life as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
And then just be honest with yourself about what it is you want. Don't try to put a square peg in a round hole. If you meet up with someone who you're really physically attracted to, but you want very different things, move on.
Mhm.
Don't allow someone to steal time from you. That's the one thing that is the resource that you cannot regenerate. So, like, if you meet someone and they check all of your boxes, but you really want kids and they really don't, like, move on. Like, you're just not the right fit for each other. So I think
Mhm.
making sure that you're looking at things like values, how they interact with their family, like, do those types of things align so that you're not
Mhm.
setting yourself up for having a lifetime of fights and nightmares, right? My husband and I have very similar relationships with our family. We are very similar politically. We're aligned from a values perspective, what we think is important. When we talk about money, we have kind of the same like view as to like what it's for and what it should be. We've
Mhm.
talked about how we want to live our senior years and like how we're preparing for that. So like being aligned on all of those types of things are way more critical than like whether or not you like the color of their hair. You can do a lot of things to put yourself in a place to be successful, but you can also lower the stakes, right? You don't
Mhm.
have to hinge your entire life's happiness and future whatever on the next date, right? Like,
Mhm.
don't go into the date believing like this is the one. This is the one who's going to be my husband. This is the one who's going to be my long-term partner. This is the one who I'm going to be able to have kids with. Don't hang that on the first date. Like,
Mhm.
go into the date hoping that you're going to meet someone that you can like easily talk to. Like, those are the
Mhm.
stakes. You're just looking for someone who you can easily talk to. And
Yeah.
keep it casual. You know, you don't have to go to the fanciest restaurant. You don't have to go to the place that makes espresso martinis for $25 a glass. Just go for a walk. Pick up a Starbucks and go for a walk. Or
Mhm.
like meet someone, like find a volunteering event where you're cleaning up a park or something and just like clean up trash with someone for 2 hours. Like,
Yeah.
keep it simple. Like, it does not have to be this like dramatic thing where like you find like the perfect outfit and like the stars align and like suddenly the music stops and you walk in and there's a spotlight. And it's like we build these things up for ourselves because of like what like
Yeah.
magazines and like Hollywood and TV show us like what dating is supposed to look like. That's not what dating looks like at all. Like, it's
Mhm.
so basic compared to like what you think it's going to be.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I love that. And I think it just sounds like with all of this, like just be in a really good place as you're on these apps and just have your cup that's full. So, did you get to have your wedding that you budgeted for?
Yes, we did. It was a lovely wedding. We had just over 200 people there. It was an event.
Yeah, I'd say.
But we had a great time, and friends came from as far as Wales in the UK to celebrate with us in Buffalo. Friends from California came. So it was a lot of fun. And then we actually went on our honeymoon in 2019, and I'm so grateful because if we had planned this like epic Scandinavian adventure through like Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Iceland, like just did a huge country hop, and it was a lot of fun. And if I had planned all of that for 2020 and then had to cancel it because of COVID, I would have been absolutely apoplectic. So I am so glad that we were able to get it in before the
Yeah.
pandemic started. We had such a lovely time.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Awesome. Where can people find out more about you and tell us a little bit about what you do as well, because that's yeah, pretty interesting.
Sure. I know it's kind of random, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I am a voice actor. I do voiceovers for TV, radio, online commercials. If you've ever taken an online course and like a narrator walks you through the content, I do a lot of course narration. I've done audiobooks, cartoons, video games, kind of anything that has a voice. And I have a recording studio in my house. I do all of that from home. So I'm a working actor from home, which is kind of a very wild thing to be able to say in 2024.
Mm,
But yeah, it's a great job. I really love it. And if you're interested in learning more about me and my voiceover career, things like that, my website is voicebymaria.com. And then I am on the majority of the socials. My handle is just at Maria Pendo. So you can find me on Instagram and TikTok. And I'm also happy to connect with folks on LinkedIn too.
awesome. I'll make sure to link that in the show notes. And yeah, Maria's a very funny lady as well, which yeah, I'm sure you've
If you like cats, food, and just like general like aging millennial angst, you will love my Instagram because that's what it is. Food, and elderly millennial grouchiness, I think.
Perfect. I'm there. Awesome. And last question before we wrap up for today. What song are you dancing to or grooving to nowadays?
My favorite song to dance to is an oldie but goodie, but it's Whitney Houston's I Want to Dance with Somebody. There's
So
nothing better
good.
than that beat, man. You can't not scream it. The key change, it's just like I will never not sing that song if it comes on the radio, if it's playing at a bar, impossible to not smile when you're singing that song.
Yes. Yeah. Did it play at your wedding?
I think we did have it on the playlist. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We had it was hard cuz like we had a playlist of like the songs that we like absolutely wanted to hear, but also we just wanted people to be able to request songs that they like wanted to dance to and stuff. But we
Yeah.
we had a great time. The dance floor was full from the moment the DJ like started the music to like
Oh,
when we closed it down. So it was really great.
amazing. That's so good. I love your story, Maria. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today. I think so many women are gonna be able to take a lot away from today's episode and just your viewpoint on things. And yeah, I love how it all played out for you. And yeah, super great. Thank you so much for sharing and for
My
coming on
pleasure.
today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.